I grew up on the countryside, right next to a national park frequently visited by nature lovers and bird enthusiasts. It was the kind of park where you're not really allowed to bike or ride horses, only walk or run, but 10-year-old me felt it was a stupid rule and did so anyway, because the trails were perfect for it. I knew fully well that I wasn't supposed to do that, and was caught a few times, but nothing much came of it apart from a half-hearted "don't do it again." And I did, of course, until one day something frightening happened that made me stop. My family were horse breeders, and I would often take one of the horses for a ride, usually in the Forbidden Park. This day, very early morning, the first day of the summer holiday, it was beautiful outdoors, misty and foggy, yet a sky that promised a sunny day ahead. Since it was so early, before 6 o'clock, I knew there wouldn't be anyone on the trail to see me, so I let the horse set off full speed along the trail. I only slowed down on the part of the trail that got steep on one side, leading down to the river, because the thought of one step too close to the edge was too much, even for a kid with next to non-existing risk assessment skills. Suddenly the horse came to a halt and refused to take another step. I grew up with horses all my life and knew that usually indicates that you need to investigate. Is there something wrong with the hooves? Did the horse spot something that spooked it? The hooves were fine, but the horse didn't move an inch. That's when I saw it. Someone had set up a trap, a thin, sharp metal wire across the trail, in perfect neck height for an adult. I stopped and looked around, but didn't see anyone. The wire was well attached to 2 trees and impossible for me to remove, so I led the horse around it, and to do so, I had to walk up a little bit into the wooden area on the side of the trail. That is when I heard the singing. There is a song called Hedge Tom Tigabar, and it was that melody, but the lyrics were different and sung in a muffled, sniggering voice. Today I only remember parts of it, but translated it would have been something like, "Hey, all you runners, come here passing, let the lifeblood pour out." I as silently as I could, and with my heart in my throat, backed away, got up on the horse, and hurried back the way I came as fast as I could. I knew I had to tell someone about it, but at the same time I wanted to avoid admitting to riding my huge and very forbidden horse on those protected trails, so now I had a problem. The old stories about a mad old man living in the shed in the woods, a shed that was once a cottage for a local hunter, came back to me as I hung on the horse for dear life. I got home and told my older brother what had happened, and he went back there with me in tow. We found the wire trap, and after a while of searching, we also found a spear-like pole in the ground, right on the spot where you'd land if you came running and jumped over the fallen tree on the trail. That's when we called police. The area was searched and several similar traps were found, but no sight of the old man. The following summer, though, there was big news in the local paper about spear-like poles being found right under the water's surface, directly under the little tower you're supposed to dive from at the lake. And black garbage bags filled with big rocks were found on the narrow bridge crossing the river, so that if a car had hit it, it likely would have gone off the road and into the water. Story number 2. The story begins with me working as a day camp counselor. Things were going really well, the children loved me, the other counselors were fond of me, and had a blast pretty much every day of the week, plus I was making good money. One day there was a new counselor, however. We'll call him Nick. For starters, Nick looked a bit off, and he also seemed very familiar. Maybe he was a fellow patient at my orthodontist. I wasn't sure where I knew him from, if at all, but there was something strange about him I could tell. I shrugged the notion off and continued working on my merry way, until one day he approached me and extended a hairy arm. "Hey there, name's Nick, pleased to meet you." I neglectfully shook his hand and grimaced a bit. Of course, at the time, I certainly hope he hadn't noticed. "You too, anything I can do for you?" I replied. "I'm new here, and I was hoping you could show me the ropes," Nick said. "Yeah, for sure." So for the rest of the day, I served as Nick's personal tour guide, and we just hung out and talked. He was incredibly talkative, and could not keep his mouth shut. It was as if the silence scared him. I quickly grew annoyed with him and could not wait to go home that day. Well, I was in for a surprise, because when the end of the day finally came, Nick suggested that we hang out. I was fairly creeped out by Nick at this point, and declined his invitation in a friendly manner by telling him I had a soccer practice to get to. "Oh, well, how about I come and watch you play, and then we can grab a bite to eat," he proposed. "Sorry, Nick, today really just isn't good for me. I have to eat dinner out tonight for my grandpa's birthday." Nick looked a bit disturbed, and I could practically see the pits of his eyes grow deeper. "How about I call up my family, and we all eat together at Tony's kitchen?" Clearly Nick was set on hanging out with me, and I became increasingly freaked out. "Look, Nick, I appreciate your offers, but like I said, today simply isn't gonna work out. Maybe another day, huh?" "Oh, come on, I had such big plans for us," Nick said. "Another day, man," I replied. Nick finally gave up for the moment being, and I finally got to go home. I went into my living room, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the TV, fell asleep for a little bit. I woke up to a knocking at the door, and figured it was probably my sister coming home from her friend's house. I got up and opened the door, and my jaw dropped at what I saw. Nick was just standing there with a creepy grin on his face and said, "Hey there, buddy, how was soccer?" I couldn't believe my eyes. How the hell did he know where I lived? And why was he here? "Nick, I thought I told you we could hang out another day. I have to get going to dinner soon. You should really go." Nick clearly wasn't picking up on my verbal cues, because he then said, "Don't worry, I already called my mom, and she said I can come with you." "Nick, I don't think you understand. You're not allowed to come. Honestly, you're creeping me out a bit, man. Like we just met." Again, Nick's dark eyes stared into my soul as he slowly turned around and walked away. After I got home from dinner, my mom asked me to go outside and grab the mail. I ran down the stairs and out to the mailbox, and I swear I could feel something watching me. "Psst," I heard. I looked to my left. Nothing. "Psst," I heard it again. I looked to my right. Nothing. "Psst, not over there either, silly," followed by creepy laughter. I looked up and literally have never been more scared in my life at what I saw. Nick was sitting in a tree just staring down at me like a demonic angel and laughing like a maniac. I screamed and ran back inside and told my parents everything that had happened. Nick didn't show up to my camp ever again, but a few days ago I did receive a friend request from him on Facebook. Needless to say, I am not accepting that shit. So Nick, I hope never to meet you again in the future. Story number 3. This all started around November of 2014. My local public high school had a group of violent, drug-addicted teenagers that enjoyed picking fights and shooting up at lunch. As the timid 15-year-old that I was, I avoided this group like the plague. This one kid, let's call him James, was in the band just like me. Annually, they would take the band a couple hours from home to perform at schools and smaller festivals. My friends and I were so excited to go, and it all went pretty smooth until we were on this bus to our first performance. My best friend at the time, let's call her Max, was the kind of person that hated for others to feel lonely or get left out, and noticed James sitting in a row next to us all alone. She struck up a conversation with him, and he seemed nice enough, but I was uncomfortable in his presence. He just gave off a weird vibe. If Max thought he was alright, then he must be nice enough though, right? How wrong I was. Throughout the tour, James stuck to us like glue. He was more annoying than creepy, but Max still assured me that he was a really nice guy and he just didn't have good social skills or whatever. By the end of the tour, James often talked about how he sees the devil in his dreams and he's going to possess him, and other creepy stuff like that. Being the idiots we were, this still didn't ring any warning bells. We finally got home from this tour, and my mom picked me up from the school. I was glad to get away from James for the weekend. For the next few weeks, James ditched his druggo group and was constantly hanging out with my group of friends. Wherever I went, James was always right there and always staring at me with these empty eyes. I got over it, just assuming he was high, but got more creeped out when he started catching my bus and then getting off at my stop. He'd follow me to my house, but just before I walked into it, he would turn the other way and continue up the street. So this creep knew where I lived, and I didn't like it one bit. I'm gonna skip the rest of the smaller encounters that happened with him for the remainder of that year, just to pick up the pace of the story. I had just gotten out of the shower after my first day back at school over the holidays, and I checked my phone. There were 75 unread messages from a group chat with Max, James, and I in it. The conversation went something like this. James: "I'm gonna kill myself if I can't be with her." Max: "James, don't do it. Who are you talking about?" James then sent a photo of my name carved into his arm. I freaked the fuck out, and to make me even more afraid, James sent me the following messages. Insert my address here. I know you are home alone. I have a knife. I'm coming to find you. Max and I were freaking. Because I was home alone, she Skyped me for a majority of that night. Nothing else happened that night, and I am so lucky for that. I was stupid enough to not tell anyone at this point. I was just so afraid of getting in trouble. The next night, I got a call over Facebook Messenger from James, and I immediately declined. 35 calls later, he got the hint and stopped. Once he stopped calling, I blocked his Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and his phone number. I removed any trace of him in my life in hopes of feeling better. It worked, and I fell asleep for a few hours until I was woken up by my phone ringing again. It was a private number, but I knew it was James. I declined and he calls again. This happened around 20 more times, and I was pissed. This crazy bastard is doing this at 3 a.m. I made the decision to tell the head of year the next day at school. That day I talked to my head of year, showed her screenshots of all the conversations, and showed her the very graphic photo of my name carved into his forearm. I anxiously waited for a response from her, but I got nothing. The next day at school I approached her, and she said that James just took a crush to the extreme and I should be flattered. I snapped at that moment and broke down in tears. I hadn't slept in the last few days, and the stress of school assessments had all piled up. I was sent home because of my fragile mental state. A few weeks later, James was sent away to an all-boys boarding school, and all was well. I thought it was the end of James, and I could get back to normal. Mid-November 2015, it had been a year since my first encounter with James. I was more wary about guys, but besides that, all was normal. A few things had changed, so I'll just fill you in on a few of the major changes. I had a fight with Max, and we had stopped talking, and I was now best friends with a girl named Kat. Kat knew all about what happened between James and I, but we didn't really talk about it anymore. I also had changed my group of friends. We were all in band and about to go on tour again. A few days before we went on band tour, guess who shows up? Fucking James. I asked the teacher running the tour if James would be attending, and he was. At this point, I am fuming, and Kat explained how he had stalked me for so long. This makes no difference, so I refused to go on the tour and demand my money back. This tour cost over $600, and once I was told that I couldn't get it back, I didn't want to waste such a large amount of money. I had to go. My dad sent the school an email saying that if I was harassed by James at any point of this tour, they would be involving the police. The first few days of tour went smoothly, and I didn't notice James at all. On the second last night, we were taken on a Disco River cruise. I'm claustrophobic, so for a majority of the cruise, I stayed on the deck of the boat in the fresh air. But Kat dragged me down onto the dance floor because they were playing our song. I immediately spotted James standing away from the crowd, talking to one of my peers. I felt sorry for her, but decided to dance. It was nearing the end of the cruise, and the last song was playing. Just a warning for anyone who is triggered by sexual assault, I'd recommend you stop listening now and skip to the next story. I felt someone brush up against me, and I immediately knew who it was. Before I could react, James forced himself up against me from behind while grabbing my ass and grinding on me. He whispered in my ear about how good I looked and that he was going to take me right there. Then James just walked away like nothing had happened. I looked petrified, and Kat immediately knew something was up. She walked me away from the crowd, and I had a full-blown panic attack. The mixture of the loud music, small crowded space, and James broke me. The boat arrived at the dock, and it was pissing down with rain. Kat, my hero, races to the bus and saves me a spot as far away from James as possible. She must have warned a couple of my guy friends to keep James far away, and they did. One friend half-walked, half-carried me because I was shaking so much to the bus. He sat me down on the window seat at the back, and the rest of my friends sat around Kat and I so he couldn't get near me. Halfway through the bus ride back to the hotel, one of my friends caught James filming me. Once I was safe in my hotel room, I told a trusted teacher about the experience, and he was pissed. I was told that he would be sent home. This gave me a sense of security, and I fell asleep for the night. The next morning, James was still in the hotel. I asked the teacher why. He said that there was no proof that this happened, and that he couldn't do anything about it. That fucker then shrugged his shoulders and said, "Boys will be boys." Because of this encounter, I moved schools, have regular counseling, and I'm still trying to get justice for what he has put me through. Nobody will take me seriously, and James got off scot-free. I am so afraid that he will do this to another girl. Everyone, please remember to be cautious about who you choose to let into your life and go with your gut. If someone seems off, they probably are. So James, let's not meet.